בראשית ברא אלוהים את השמיים ואת הארץ. That's the first sentence from the most important book in the world, also the most published one, the Bible. And the Bible had such a big impact on the world in terms of theology and philosophy and questions of morality and whatnot. And even that story, this creation story from Genesis about the creation of the world, it helps shape our collective imagination of how we imagine the next world, that is heaven. And the complexity of those stories from Genesis, from the Bible, are really enchanting for me. I mean, we all know and we all remember that God created the sky and the earth, and then the day and the light, and the plants and the animal along with the man and the woman. Unless, of course, we're reading the second chapter of Genesis, where God created the sky and the earth, and then immediately he created the man and the woman. Or we all know that God created man and woman equally in his own shape in order to rule and conquer the world. Unless, of course, we're reading the second chapter of Genesis, where he created the man first from the dirt, and then only after that he created the woman from the rib of the man in order to guard God's creation. And obviously, these differences between the stories sparked a lot of these different discussions and arguments between the people along hundreds of years. But nowadays, most theologists and researchers believe that these are not two different stories, but rather complementing stories. Another thing I found fascinating when it comes to the Bible, and yes, you're in the correct presentation, is what we call the canonization of the scriptures. That is, the Bible as we know it today, of course, was not written in one day, and it was not written by one single author. It's been written by many authors, many of them we don't know about. And for hundreds of years, this Bible has been written, re-edited, and different committees have gathered, different people in different committees have gathered around and decided which stories, which book were actually godly and which were not. And about 2,000 years ago, the Bible as we know it has been sealed, the canonization of the scriptures, it has been sealed. And even if there are small mistakes, like grammatical mistakes, they are still being copied nowadays to the Bible as we know it. In fact, if the Bible if a certain book will have even one single character that is different, then it's considered broken, and it should be buried in a special ceremony because it's not holy enough. And considering the implication of each word and each sentence in the Bible, what I do find fascinating is the idea that if something would look different, if those committee would choose different books or they would edit it differently, how would the world look? Would we have different laws, or would we have different questions of morality? Would there be more wars or less wars? A quick time leap into 2005, and in front of you what you see is Linus Torvalds, probably the most important or most known person in the open source, the guy who wrote Linux. But I'm definitely not going to talk about Linux today. But before we're going to start talking about what this guy is doing here and why are we talking about open source stuff, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. I assume most of the people are here developers, but let's just remind ourselves one thing. Making computers do what we want is really, really, really difficult. We're using some different spells and weird words from dead languages and some black voodoo in order to make the computer do exactly what we want. And it's even harder to make it work as a team. So for that, we have what we call the version control. Here is a typical schema of how a version control will look. We have the repository, which is basically a canonical copy of where all the information is, and we have different clients. Each client, according to their own access and permission, are able to read certain files and write into certain files. But this typical schematic way of working, maybe it would work nicely for Microsoft Windows or Adobe Photoshop. It just doesn't work nicely in the world of open source, where everything is completely decentralized. So in 2005, what Linus did, he decided to write Git. And what he did is actually he took the ideology of open source and build a technological tool around that idea. So Probably the most important thing about Git and the ideology behind it is that the code is always open, meaning that everybody can access everything, the entire history. They are not limited into a certain, according to different permission, limited to different sections. They can see everything. Another thing that we can see here marked in the red arrow is the hash, meaning a set of letters and digits that marks every little change. And this means that people in Spain, in Israel, in the US, whatever, they can work on the same piece of code, and later on it will be much easier to merge it. Obviously, Git's power has become, or popularity is much thanks to GitHub, which is currently the central hub for open source projects and also closed projects. But I'm not going to talk about GitHub. What interests me is starting to look at this technology and starting to understand how Git is so radical in its approach, or allows us to do some amazing stuff with it. And in order to do so, we need to start looking at projects which are not, the mainstream project like Linux. So for example, over here, we have a repository. Some dude decided to put the entire German law book inside the GitHub repository. So you can see the diff here. The red means this part of the section of the law was removed. In the green, it was replaced by something else. And basically, whoever wants to go in and see why did the change law in a certain way and who changed it, he has all the information. Another example, this is from the Israeli annual budget, and believe me, I cannot read it as well, because the way, and you probably know it also from Spain, that usually governments, when they decide to be transparent, they give you a table like that. You have absolutely no information of what the budget really is. So some geeks in Israel decided to scrape a lot of that information and just try to visualize it so humans like you and me can actually consume the information and learn about it. We can see that the idea of making, starting to open up the information has been picked up by GitHub itself, and now it also provides a few tools to have an open and transparent government and municipals. And now we are only left to think what would happen in a weird world where the Bible and the Holy Testimony would actually been written nowadays. So maybe we would see something like that. A user called Jesus, the real one, would go inside the GitHub repository and see that someone forked the Bible from a user called Moses. And if you're asking yourself, who is brave enough, who is godly enough to fork the Bible, and in order to change it 2,000 years after it was sealed, then the answer is, as you guessed, Chuck Norris. Ladies and gentlemen, it brings me great pleasure to invite Mr. Chuck Norris. Just imagine if Chuck Norris was actually here, how it would raise the bar. And, All right, so my name is Amitai Burstein. I'm the CTO and co-owner of Gizra. I'd like to talk today about what we call the Gizra way, but before we talk about our way, let's talk about what Gizra is really quickly. We're a development shop in Israel. We exist for 6 years. We're about 20 people, which is the bullshit way of saying we're exactly 17 people. You know how people always do. I know exactly how much we are. Why should I say about? So we're 17 people. It's 15 developers, 1 office administrator, and 1 project manager. We basically killed the middle management, literally. Our clientele list is, for the past 2 years, we've been working along with the team in Harvard on building the open scholar distribution, basically running all Harvard sites for the faculty and departments and so on. We are consulting and building projects for the European Union. We helped Acquire with the Grammy Pro site. We help Commerce Guys with Commerce Kickstart. Basically, we're really, really good in building websites. So that's like the 60 seconds of understanding who we are. But we're not going to talk about Gizra much, about the entity of Gizra, but rather on our way of how we are approaching projects. And basically, the Gizra way is a way of how we approach projects, whether these are open source project or closed source project. And if there is one single slide you're going to listen, it should be this one, transparency. That's probably the most important stuff, and I want to share with you my idea of transparency. This is a screenshot from a YouTube movie. It's a Penn and Teller movie. Penn and Teller are magicians which perform their magic, and then they explain how they do it. So over here, what we can see they're doing is they're doing a magic of, the cups and the balls and moving it really quickly and showing and hiding the balls. And then when they finish doing the magic, which they did really, really well, they say, and obviously you should never, ever, ever do it with a transparent cup. And obviously they do it with a transparent cup. And this is exactly where it becomes interesting. Because even though it's a transparent cup and you can actually see everything, they still perform the magic beautifully. You cannot see the balls, hiding and showing. And the idea over here is because they knew that it's, everybody can see it, they had to reach a much, much higher skill in order to perform the magic. I mean, they could be an average, apparently an average magician would be able to do it, but you need to be that good in order to do it with a transparent cup. But the idea of transparency isn't necessarily about bombarding your client or any stakeholders that cares about that with tons of information. Remember I told you about the last slide to listen only to that slide? So I lied. Listen to this slide. So this is an example. This is an example for, it's actually a closed source project we're doing for a client. So we have here the design. Don't worry, your eyes are okay. The reason you're seeing it blurry is because we have the HTML page over here, and it's a layered image, meaning we have the actual HTML and a JPEG on top of it with some opacity. So what the developer did over here, it just gives an update to the client of whoever is reading, and is saying, okay, I was able to place most of the elements in place. I'm now working on adapting the logo and the thumbnails in the bottom. And the idea over here is being really accurate in the terms of what information we are giving. Because again, that same developer could first not update, not do anything, could just show a bunch of CSS that nobody will care about, or he could write 6 different paragraphs, I did this and I did that. But in the end, being accurate is the most important. And maybe it looks like a silly example. I mean, yeah, obviously, we're seeing the layered image and it makes so much sense. But in the end, I've seen so many different projects that do not do that, do not share that information in such a precise way. And, it's a shame. And I think that's a good idea. So it's not about just understanding how to share the image, but it's having the mindset of understanding how do I pass that information in a way that people would like to consume. So let's continue. Over here you can see that's the design of the new Gizra site. Unfortunately, it's still not live. It's still on the dev. And the idea of open source is it's not Boolean. It's not true or false, right? It's on a scale. So, for example, our site, you can go to it. You'll see Gizra.com. From the browser, you see the site. But it also has a GitHub repository, which is completely open, right? So it's not really an open source because nobody will use it, but it's in the open public. So obviously, the first question that I get, what about security issues? So again, you can imagine if I opened it, then I know that everybody can see it, then I will take security even more seriously than what I took before. And the presentation isn't about that we need to open source everything. No, it's about how we are trying to use the mindset that we learned from open source and approach with that mindset into closed source projects. And obviously, you know, the Gizra way isn't something we sat down in Gizra and, you know, we started reinventing everything. I would say it's like 90% things that we learned from open source itself, and the rest is other stuff we're contributing into the open source. So another lesson we learned from open source is coding standards. Yeah, I even have it. I even have it here. So I came to the front desk of the hotel and I asked the receptionist if she can give me an adapter. And she told me, oh, you want an adapter to a normal electricity? And I said, no, I want the adapter to the weird electricity you have with the 2 pins. The normal one is with the 3, right? So everything is normal. I mean, you can see so many different internet wars about what is right. 2 spaces, 4 spaces, or a tab. And the correct answer is, I don't know. It's not really important. I mean, if we look at this example, a silly example, I can assure you OG doesn't has this function. Even if you're not a developer, it would be pretty easy for you to understand what this function is doing. It's just returning true for whatever it is. But if I will try to submit this function into the committee of Drupal that decides what is wrong and what is right, they will take all my ranks, they will send me to jail for some time, and they will ridicule me. Because there are 3 horrible mistakes over here. There's 1 extra line in the comment. I had a typo in the word implements, and God forgive me, I forgot the dot in the end of the sentence. And obviously, you see, the code didn't change. It's the same code. It will return true. However, thanks to the coding standards, we're getting few things. First of all, obviously, I don't need to see, okay, this part some user wrote, some guy wrote, and this guy part some girl wrote, and whatever. It just looks like one person wrote it. But more importantly, it gives us a tool, what we call a kind of a code smell, that if I see somebody is writing this code and they are not aware to the coding standards, then they might be missing also more important stuff. Like, I would assume they don't know the API good enough. Maybe they don't know about the security implication of each function and so on. So basically, coding standards are hiding best practices inside them. Fail often, fail fast, fail cheap. So this is really coming from, we know, from open source, from closed source projects. Or mostly, rather than, okay, it looks weird here. On my Mac, I can assure you it looks nice, the sentence. And we know it. I mean, none of us is trying to approach a project and, you know, sit down and code it and develop it for 1 year, only, you know, to publish it after 1 year and realize nobody cares about it or nobody is going to use it. So it makes a lot of sense, and there are quite a few agile talks over here of doing stuff really, really fast. But one thing that we do care about is, and this is our project manager said, is one of the problem of, you know, the specs, those big PDF files, is 99% of those specs have more authors than readers, right? Most people are sitting, in the end it reaches you, the developer, and you're saying, I mean, you cannot read it. Nobody can read it. And it's not that I'm saying there's nothing to do with those specs, because there is a really a talented Irish artist that you can send her those books, and she can probably do something fancier with that. All right, it's that time of the day to have that embarrassing talk about automatic tests. Who thinks automatic tests are good? Raise their hands. Don't be shy, don't be shy, don't be shy. Out of the people who wrote their hands, how many are actually doing it for all their projects? All their projects. Todo. All right, so I will start from the beginning.
God creates the world.
All right, so I'll say it like this. We all agree that automatic tests, and the people who didn't raise their hands, you're just lazy. You do believe it. I mean, who doesn't care about automatic tests? And what you see here is a B-hat test. So I'll go really quickly. There's a functionality on one of our projects. It's a closed source project, that there is a functionality of locking a document. Basically, it's just a user can lock a document, which is basically prohibit from other users to edit it. So only he or an administrator can edit the node and unlock it. And this is something that will probably take a developer to check it, to QA it about 10 or 15 minutes. That's it, not too much. But that's the thing. The developer will QA it maybe once, hopefully once, and not ever again, certainly if we're talking about a more complex system. So there is some business logic going on. There is some business logic going on here that if you will not automatic test, nobody will ever check it again, even if you have manual QA. So it's really worth having those tests. And what you see over here, the English you are reading, these are the B-hat tests. That's what's so amazing about it, is that it's being translated into computer stuff. So basically, the system knows how to check itself. And when it comes to testing, I always say two things, which are kind of the opposite, but it's finding the balance somewhere. First is don't give up. I mean, also for you as the development freelancer or company that are providing a service and you want to provide the best service. We all know that the best service also includes some automatic tests. So I'll say don't give up. On the other hand, don't try to be a purist. Don't try to do 100% test coverage. I mean, one of the things I hear about B-hat testing is that it's also the documentation of the different features. Dude, it's not. So this is purist talking, and I'm completely not a purist. I want to do the project as fast as possible and charge as much as possible on it. And you know, when Harvard, when they approached us in OpenScholar, they had a stability problem. So they would do a release once every 2 months, and you know how releases look. Certainly when it's a complex system, when there is no automatic testing, you are writing and you're really crossing your finger when you're doing a release, and then a bunch of hotfixes and so on. And 2 years ago, I told Ferdy, the project lead of OpenScholar, let me write one single test. That's it, one single line. 2 years later, we have now a test suite of 45 minutes running Selenium, with Selenium, which checks JavaScript. We're even checking Apache Solr in Travis. So basically, every single line of code just that changes is being thoroughly tested. Again, not 100% test coverage, but we were able, for example, to completely overhaul the access system in OpenScholar, and we did it in 1.5 weeks, like hassle-free, because everything, when it came to access, was properly tested. Okay, this is a completely imaginary graph. What happened is, some time ago, we were consulting a pretty big project in Israel, and we were just consulting, and it was like very few hours. So it was like seeing a car accident from the side, so you can just scream, no, you're gonna fail. It's not gonna work. And yeah, obviously, it failed and it didn't work. But the thing is, what we saw, and this is the red line is the Gizra way, and the blue line is not the Gizra way. We can see two interesting stuff over here. First of all, we can see that the blue line looks like a snake that ate an elephant from The Little Prince. The second interesting, or less interesting, is that we can see that in the beginning, in the first 3 months, in the Gizra way, there is much more effort to be done. Obviously, you know it, in the first 3 months of a project, everything is working so easy, right? You just put the models, you do the configuration, and so on. But after usually 3 and 4 months, you start getting the regressions, right? Suddenly, all the logic that you've written in the beginning isn't working. If you would put all those automatic tests, if you would, build everything as installation profile, if you will be rebuilding over and over again, then we can see that after 3-4 months, this is usually the crossing point where we see that you start enjoying the fruits of what you did. Code review, right? It makes so much sense we see it in Drupal. it should make sense also on your project. Well, if you're a single freelancer, then you cannot really code review yourself, but usually people work in teams. So over here, we can see another example where we have a piece of code and I'm writing something, this looks wrong, and the developer answers, yeah, I fixed it, or whatever. And this creates something. And this is, again, open to all the stakeholders, to paying customers, to people who see that, hey, I just paid for your developer and he did something wrong. And I mean, why didn't he do it right to begin with, right? That's what they assume. And we say that it's actually creating what we call honest code. And honest code is, first of all, it makes sure that the code itself is right and it's working properly. But we also call it honest code because since the stakeholders, since the client was able to see it, and he was able to say, okay, even that something was wrong, somebody is there with another set of eyes to make sure that everything is working. So they are relaxed. And if the client is relaxed, it means you're getting less phone calls and you're able to do your job, with a clear hand. Yeah, Scrum, meetings, and deadlines. So a few years ago, I was consulting a big company in Israel. I don't know, they have like 4,000, 5,000 people working there. So it's really an enterprise, a real corporate. And they had this sign about Scrum. Scrum is originating from rugby. So they had something similar to that with a silly explanation. In Scrum, like in rugby, we're moving all the team together to reach our goal. And I would say that if that is Scrum, if I'd have to put every day my head for about 10 minutes around the asses of 10 different sweating players, that's not the way I want to do it. So the idea of communicating with the client is great, but the idea of or at least what I know of Scrum, of talking every day, we're trying not to do it. We talk with the client only when we need it, because if we talked about all the transparency, all the update in the issue queue, the client is saying it. The client is relaxed, and when we need to talk, we need to talk. Meetings, of course. Sorry. Meeting, of course, we have meetings, sales meetings, but I don't have meetings when I take 7 different developers and we sit together and we talk. I talk with one developer and the 5 other developers are sitting with their iPhones on the bottom and playing with that because, it's just a waste of time. And deadlines. One of the biggest problems of projects that we see is time estimation. That time estimation isn't working. And I'd like to illustrate it through the story, the Jorge story. It's pretty beautiful what I did here, right? So that's Jorge. He's a developer. He's not doing much sports. He has somewhat low communication skills. He's in a relationship with an imaginary girlfriend for the past 2 years. The stereotype. And Jorge is starting a new project, and he has a new project manager. And the project manager, he comes to the room, and he. Sorry, I just realized right now. I'm sorry, it was kind of sexist of me to say that the project manager is a guy, right? Sorry. In my Twitter for the past 6 months, I'm seeing all the time tweets about sexism in IT, and apparently I fell to my own trap, and I assumed it, so apologies to everybody. So the project manager, she walked into the room, and it's also sexist, right? The fact that I just replaced the man with a woman. So is it sexist to talk about sexism? I don't know. That's the thing. I'm really confused about it. I don't know what I should do, and I just want to tell you the Jorge story. So I'll try to do it as ambiguous as possible, okay? So the project manager... they come to the room and they say, "Hola, Jorge." "Hola, Jorge. Yo soy el new project manager, ¿sabes? Proyecto managero. Una pregunta, Jorge. ¿Cuánto tiempo para hacer blog post en el sitio internerio?" I don't know why I'm doing it in an American accent, by the way. I practice it without an American accent. So Jorge, you know, he's a developer, he's saying he's almighty and everything, so he's like, it will take me 1 hour. And, you know, nothing takes 1 hour. Just making coffee, it takes me more than 1 hour. So obviously, like, they don't meet the deadline. And then a few days later, the project manager again approaches Jorge, and they go, "Jorge, ¿te acordás la última vez, Jorge? No bueno. No bueno. Una pregunta, ¿cuánto tiempo para moving el logo 2 píxeles?" And, you know, Jorge is smart enough and, like, he underestimated the stuff. So he, like, want to make sure nobody's on top of his head. So he's like, 3 weeks or something like that. And that's actually the only thing moving a logo that can actually take you, like 1 hour. That's the Jorge story. It was sad. We cried a bit. We laughed a bit. But the conclusion from it is never, ever give your developers, don't ask them about time estimation. The only people who need to do time estimation is senior developers or somebody who really understands the implication of giving a time estimation that isn't right. And usually the way of doing it, to make it easier for us, is to break things down. So usually I'd say that a typical task should take, 4 to 5 hours, and even that, it's always good to get some feedback from the developer and see, for me usually as a project lead, I approach the developer looking through their shoulders just to make sure that, they're on the right track. And I'd say that the maximum number of hours for a task is maybe 12 or 15 hours. That's it. If it's more than that, then it's going to be really, really hard to do a proper time estimation. And I think it's so often that we see projects are failing because of time estimation, because time estimation is right, the client isn't happy, you are not happy, and this is where we see things starting to fail. Contributions. So obviously when I ask people about contribution, they tell me, yeah, I don't have time for that, because that's what everybody are saying. And okay, fair enough. I mean, if you don't have time, that's fair. So, I'm the maintainer of pretty big models in Drupal, organic groups, and entity reference, and message stack. And I know that when I talk with people about it, it might sound a little intimidating, in terms of how much contribution has been done there. So I just want to show actually something else. This is a really silly example. It's a gist, a way of just putting a bit of code. This is what I did over here, something about logging with Angular to another server, whatever. This is really, it's not a blog post, it's hardly the code itself, it's almost nothing. I just put a gist out there and I tweeted about it. And you can see, can you? In the red arrow that 2 people starred it, added a star. Meaning the 2 people that I don't know of, right? My team used it for sure. 2 people I don't know of have used this information. And that's a contribution. It's fair enough. And, this is, when it comes to contribution, it's only about practicing. You probably cannot, if you've never contributed, jump directly into starting writing patches for Drupal core. Believe me, don't try to do it. The Drupal core is a scary place to begin with. So don't start there. You can start with gist and just tweet about it, or a small blog post or whatever. And, in the end, it comes back to you. And I can assure you, from my experience, that contributing comes back to you. In fact, I'm standing here in Spain giving information to you while my wife and daughter are in La Playa having fun. Yeah, so that was the Gizra way. Thank you. Preguntas? I have 10 minutes. You're going to sit here for 10 minutes, okay? So either you ask question or we'll have that embarrassing silence. Yeah.
So you say that when you estimate times, it shouldn't be more than 15 hours? The time that you're estimating, right?
I'm just saying that a task, even if it was build Facebook, you know, like every client is basically saying, I have $5, can you build me Facebook? And you're like, no. But even that, you should start breaking down into much, much smaller tasks. Okay, I'm going to have the login, and the login is 4 hours. And then you have this block is 8 hours, and so on. And what I'm saying, if you want to have one task like that you estimate it with 30 hours, then I would say no, break it down into two smaller tasks that you can better evaluate.
So if you have the entire project for estimating, how do you do that?
I just break it down to all the different...
everything?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, also for the client, I mean, it's more work for sure. But first of all, I mean, in the end, building website isn't that hard in terms of, you know, recognizing what the feature is. So you have the different blocks. So you just can, again, we're not working with specs. We already have either the wireframe or the design. So I can just look, okay, this block, it looks like a view, whatever. It would take me 4 hours. Again, even if it's a view and I want to say it's going to take me 5 minutes because I'm a cocky developer and it will take me 5 minutes, it won't take me 5 minutes. I would say it will take me 4 hours because, you know, with the overhead of everything, it will take me 4 hours.
And do you have like not a template, but... Oh, sorry. Do you have like, well, we always, when we do that, we spend 5 hours, so you have like...
Yeah, we have a template which we copied from Node 1, I think, that they like shared it, and Excel, I can add it in the comment, a link to the template we're using.
Ah, okay. I didn't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, good morning.
Hi.
I read in the speech description that you were involved in the website of the White House or in the website of Harvard. Did you do that with Drupal? Can you explain your experience? How did you approach the project?
Yes. So first of all, the White House, our code is in the White House. We didn't build it. Unfortunately, nobody paid me even $1. Even I'm sending bills to Obama. I tell them I need to charge you, but no, I didn't get the money yet. The way but like for example, for Harvard, we're approaching this project. Well, it's an ongoing ongoing project. It has a bigger team with like 8 developers and 1 project lead and 1 QA and so on. But we're approaching it with exact same tools or exact same mindset that we're approaching all projects. That is, breaking the tasks and, you know, providing the code, the testable code, making sure that everything is exported to code. Basically, all the best practices you can think of.
Nice presentation.
Thank you.
How do you build your clients? Do you do it based on time? You sell them like packages days, like I'm going to spend 100 days to build you this product? Or do you do it based on tasks, like we're going to build you this and that's the price? How do you deal with that?
It depends. It depends. If it's an ongoing task, or if the client understands the power of being agile and being able to change the path on their way, yeah, so definitely we'll go with an hourly based or daily based charge. But we also know how to make a fixed price. A fixed price is, it's kind of more dangerous to you because, again, you need to estimate it properly. But this is exactly where the time estimation is important. On the other hand, usually what happens in fixed price is you give yourself more headroom, so like you charge more. So maybe in the end you'll work a little less, but you will charge more. I mean, it's projects, it's hard. If everybody would do it, and if it was easy, everybody would do it, right? So.
Yeah. And with time estimates, you cannot really, you don't have a margin to improve, right? I mean, because you're going to sell them this day, and either you're going to lie to the client saying you spent much less time, or you're just going to get paid for the time you spent. Why with fixed price, you have the margin to actually be more efficient, right? And
I'll give you an example from my experience from Harvard. So we're not working with fixed price, we're working like on a monthly basis. So yeah, like I actually need to work for every hour. On the other hand, for the past 2 years, Harvard has been paying for 4 different developers, and I can assure you we've been charging like crazy. So in the end, if I compare having a 2 years contract, then yeah.
thanks.
Sure. There was another question here.
Yeah, you said something like you don't like Scrum and all the relationship with customers. Am I right?
First, I hate relationships about customers. I hate 90% of my customers. No, I mean, I hate 90% of my customers. What I'm trying to say is, I appreciate, I'd like to do Scrum if it fits my needs, not to do Scrum for the idea of Scrum. Like I said, I'm not a purist. So if I won't do a Scrum with a client just in sake of, okay, let's talk about what I did yesterday and what I'm going to do today. Let's talk only if, there is a matter that I'm unclear or you're not clear.
If you need some feedback,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
If I need...
And how's your cycle, your work cycle? How do you work on a daily basis with your customer? You only have a meeting with them when you have a question.
Let's say that
on a regular
again,
basis?
it depends on how big the project is. So, for example, with Harvard, I talk with them three times a week. With other clients, it could be once a week. But in GitHub, for example, where all the stakeholders are, we're updating all the time. So even when I'm doing a task, I wouldn't wait till the end of the task, even if it was a 15-hour task. I wouldn't wait till the end of it to start reporting what I'm doing. So I'm writing update. I'm now working on this. Update. I have problems with this section. Even if the client won't care about it, even if they're not technical, they understand where I'm approaching. And a lot of clients, they catch it up really rapidly. And they're starting to look at the updates. And and again, depends on the project. They might see that I have problems, implementing something that they will say, you know what, it's actually not that important. So, I mean, in the end, it's just being able to communicate what we're doing. I think that's probably the most important thing. The way we're, in the end, we said that making computers do what we want is really hard, but it's probably even harder to communicate between the developers and the project lead and the client and so on. So just what I'm trying to say is use the tools which in a way that serves you, not just
I agree.
Just to use the tool.
How do you approach this communication problem? Do you make an agreement, a formal agreement? A first meeting with the customer and with the team, or you let them get educated?
We kind of explain them the Gizra way of doing stuff in the beginning. So we tell them, listen, let's start with a weekly discussion. You'll need more. We can do more. Usually, and that's the thing with the client, it's not that he's just waiting for your job. They're probably doing something else. So they're pretty happy not to do the talks as well, okay. Or at least from my experience.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, maybe they hate me as well, the way I am. Last question.
Hi. Hello. Hi. When you go to one of those huge corporations that works usually, not usually, but always with closed source, and normally know something about open source, but is really weird for them. How do you sell, I don't know, Drupal or the project? What do you focus on? I mean, in open source and community power, from a functionality point of view, just talk about Gizra and you forget about Drupal and open source.
You can see that I hardly mention the word, or just because I know that most of the folks here are Drupal developers, I mentioned a bit Drupal, but if you'll go over the video later on and count the number of times I've said open source or Drupal, I hope you won't do it, literally. But you see, it was very few. I mean, if I'm going to a corporate, if I'm going to the European Union, so okay, they're using Drupal over there, so it's easy to talk with Drupal. But you don't necessarily need to push them Drupal, because most people don't know about it, or they don't necessarily care about it. If you talk about vendor lock-in and stuff like that, that maybe it makes more sense. I find that a lot of times people are trying to sell Drupal in the way they perceive it as developer, which is not necessarily what's the right thing for the client, because I wouldn't say that open source is always better than proprietary. I mean, I've seen so many shitty projects done with Drupal, you know, which is not good, so why is that better? In the end, I always say, what's most important is you can recognize, you can point at the developer who is doing the development, and you're able to say they're a good developer or not. If they're using Drupal or another proprietary system, I find it, you know, that it's, I wouldn't say it's not important. Obviously, I'm dealing just with open source projects because I see the value in it. But I'm saying if it's a big corporate, company, you need to learn them a bit before, and not necessarily try to shove open source in their throat and tell them about let's contribute and stuff like that, because they will be afraid. You can contribute still. I mean, just make sure your model is generic enough and you can just contribute. Bueno, muchas gracias de invitarme acá, che.